Hi everyone and welcome back to the Better Your Life channel where we talk about everything related to anxiety and our mental well-being. So my name, if you haven't met me before, is Jennifer Roblin and I'm an anxiety therapist and specialist based in the UK. Today we're going to explore another one of the questions that often comes up in my practice, and that is, can our thoughts cause anxiety? And the answer is yes. Our thoughts can cause anxiety, and our anxiety can also influence our thoughts. So, do you ever have that constant voice in your head, that chatter that just never ever stops, right? And can it be a bit mean at times, especially if you're talking about yourself? I thought so. We can often say things to ourselves that we would never dream of saying to anybody else, and we can really put ourselves down. So we may already be aware of the physical impacts of anxiety, such as a racing heart, the shortness of breath, leg and muscle aches, that funny feeling in your tummy. But our thoughts also play a big part in how we are feeling and may cause us to worry even more. Now, unconsciously, it is highly likely we distort the reality of a situation when we are worried or anxious. And I don't mean in a happy, positive way. The thoughts are often negative, and we refer to these as cognitive distortions. Now, this isn't about stopping our thoughts or even judging them. It's all about being aware of some of our repeated thought patterns and questioning the evidence that we have to support them. So I just want to unpack, what are cognitive distortions? Let's break it down further and look at each word. So cognitive means something related to our thinking, our thought process, our conscious mental processing. And distortions just means something that's either misrepresented, twisted, or deformed. So simply put, cognitive distortions are exaggerated and unrealistic thoughts that lead to negative thinking and emotions. Now, cognitive distortions are internal mental filters or biases that we tell ourselves that are just not necessarily true and are very often immensely unhelpful. So they can increase our anxieties and make us feel very negative towards ourselves, very critical of ourselves. Now, it's said that we have approximately 60,000 thoughts per day. Incredible, right? Our brains are continuously processing so much information, and to help us cut down on the mental burden that this creates, our brain creates shortcuts. Now, sometimes this serves us really well, like when we instinctively stop at a red traffic light or we turn the lights on when the room's dark. But at other times, these thoughts don't serve us so well. So, being mindful of our self-talk and how we speak to ourselves can help us understand ourselves better, and it can also help us understand and relate better to others. Now, before we look at some of the most common negative cognitive distortions, if you're finding this video helpful, then please do like and subscribe, and go ahead and hit the notification button so that you're kept up to date with all our latest videos. And the links to all of our free resources that are in the description, so you can make use of those whenever you need to. And if you know of anyone else struggling with anxiety, please do go ahead and share this video and this channel with them, as we want to be able to let as many people know that nobody needs to be struggling with anxiety. Now, back to common cognitive distortions. And I want you to just listen to them and see how many you recognise, because I think there's a high chance you'll be nodding along to quite a few. So, black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking. This is strongly linked to anxiety and to our fight and flight response. Learning to see shades of grey instead of thinking in extremes is immensely useful. Now, when we can appreciate that there is a middle ground, it's not one or the other, that the situation isn't black and white, then It reduces and stops the negative emotional thoughts that are necessary to maintain an anxious state. Now, an example of this could be, I always get anxious when driving. Now, recognising that you sometimes get anxious when driving can be quite a relief. Maybe it's just that you get anxious driving on the motorways, but you're fine on the local roads or you're fine in your local area. So it's breaking those thoughts down and getting a little bit more evidence around them. And then overgeneralization, another common one. Generalizing is natural and may have validity in some situations. However, seeing a pattern based on a single event or being overly broad in the conclusions we draw can blind us to the reality of a situation. So an example of an overgeneralization could be, nothing good ever happens to me. Now, ask yourself, nothing? Really? And you'll generally find evidence that this thought pattern is not valid, is actually not correct. Another one we use is mental filters. This is when we only pay attention to certain types of evidence. We may pick out the negative detail and dwell on it exclusively and ignore any of the positives. An example of this one is the traffic jam has ruined my entire day. Even though before I got stuck in traffic jam, I had a really good conversation with a friend of mine, or, it's very hard for one thing to ruin your entire day when there's been other things going on as well. Disqualifying the positives. Now, by discounting or rejecting the good things that happen to us, or the good things that we have done, we can feel anxious even when we achieve something great. So, an example of this would be justifying something positive as if it was just pure luck alone, just a fluke, and you yourself had little influence over the result. So you might say, the A star I received in maths was a fluke, so it doesn't count. It still counts. Now, comparisons. When we compare ourselves to others, we assume we know their reality when actually we don't. Assuming that all of our co-workers are smarter than us shines us in a negative light. And sure, there may be some things that they find easier, but these comparisons are out of proportion when there are most likely some situations that we ourselves find easier than our colleagues. Another one, jumping to conclusions and mind reading. This is when we believe we can guess what someone else is thinking, when they may not be thinking that at all. An example of this one would be when we feel guilty and worthless if someone ignores us and walks past us and doesn't acknowledge us or doesn't return a call. Now, the reality is most likely that they didn't see us or they're tied up with something else at that precise moment. It is often nothing to do with us at all, but we feel negative emotions because we try to predict what is happening in their life or their thoughts. Fortune telling. This is when we think we can predict the future, often as a result of something that has influenced our past. So, if we didn't get the last 3 jobs, say, that we've applied for or gone for interviews for, we can start predicting that we won't get the next few jobs we apply for either. And it's all too easy to give up trying. We don't even try then because we've convinced ourselves it's not worth it. The reality is that no one gets accepted for every job, and eventually, if we keep putting ourselves out there, we will be successful. The magnification and minimization. This is when we magnify the importance of errors as evidence of the truth. So I took the wrong turn and it was an absolute disaster. Or when we minimize a compliment, we all do this, right? Minimize a compliment we receive because we think it is undeserved or they don't really mean it. We tell ourselves they were just being nice. But notice, it's interesting, isn't it? How we don't normally apply the same logic if we receive negative feedback. Then we're able to take that, what has been said, and we ruminate on it over and over and over again. Familiar, right? Labelling and mislabelling. This one, it really grates on me. So for years, I assigned myself the label that I was a terrible public speaker. I avoided speaking in front of an audience for 30 years because of a negative experience that had happened to me while I was at school. I just refused to do it because I labelled myself as terrible. Now, when I was facing up to some of my own fears, when I turned 50, I decided that it was about time I faced that one full on. So I went on courses and I developed my speaking, and now I love it. And you know what? I've won awards for it too. And what a waste of 30 years, all because I'd given myself a label at the age of 11 and I had never questioned it in my adult life. Personalizing things, so taking something too personally that may not be personal, or seeing events as consequences of our actions when there are other possibilities. This can include blaming ourselves for a situation that we didn't create, or blaming others for a situation that we did create. Now, personalising can often be seen in relationship conflicts when we can only see things from our own point of view, and we may choose to ignore anyone else's perspective, or when we feel personally responsible for a team activity. Underestimating our ability to cope. Now, when we underestimate our ability to cope with negative events, we downplay our own resiliency and we don't even attempt to cope. Now, sometimes we refuse to even try. So instead, try and think back to a time when you did cope with a similar event. How did you do it? If you're struggling to identify something, then who do you know that you can take inspiration from and maybe ask them for help? Catastrophizing. Now, thinking of daunting events as catastrophes instead of acknowledging the reality of the situation. An example of this would be your boss asks you to come to her office the next day, and we may spend that evening thinking that she's going to fire us. We may stay awake all night thinking that I'll not be able to afford the mortgage, and my house will be repossessed, and my partner will leave me, and the kids will be taken from me, and I'll spend the rest of... We just go on and on and on and create this catalogue of disastrous events when the thing that we're worrying about hasn't even happened. The reality was she just had a simple question about a report that you completed. Should and must statements. Using critical words like should and must can put a lot of pressure on us and make us feel really guilty, or like we have already failed before we've even started something. So an example of this would be, okay, I need to clean the car this Saturday. If I say I need to do it, that's a job that needs to be done. If I say I should be cleaning the car this Sunday, it means that I've already got it in my mind that there's something else I want to be doing instead. So it may be that I want to spend time with my family. So saying I should clean the car is setting myself up for failure because I don't even want to do that in the first place. So just take that pressure away and decide to do it when I have got more time. Emotional reasoning. When we use emotions as evidence of the truth, even though the evidence does not support our feelings, such as I don't feel clean, even though I've just washed my hands 3 times. Therefore, I should wash my hands again. Now, this is often a contributor for people struggling with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So, which is just another form of anxiety, and we put coping strategies in place. So, how can you become more mindful of your cognitive distortions? Being aware of your go-to cognitive distortions is the first step. Question your thoughts and ask yourself, what evidence have you got to support them? What evidence have you got that doesn't support them? Now, one of my favourite quotes of all time is by Mark Twain. And he said, I've had lots of worries in my life, most of which never happened. And I think that sums up anxiety so well. Cognitive distortions amplify our anxieties and cause us to focus on situations that may never have happened or are not likely to ever happen. Dwelling on these worries multiplies them, giving them even more energy and creating even more anxiety, and it just becomes a vicious circle. So if you pop on over to the description, you'll find the cognitive distortions worksheet, and this can highlight the list that I've gone through, and you can pick out the distortions that you can relate to most. And I'd really love you to keep a track of what's happening, what are you manifesting in your life. So you can use the Thoughts Diary worksheet. Again, it's over in the description. It's all free, so just download it. And you'll be able to then keep a track of what it is you're thinking and what you're feeling. Another resource I'd really recommend is the Circle of Control and Influence worksheet, because that will make you understand that you've actually got more control over the situation than you thought you had. So how can we move forward past this? Now, remind yourself that you are doing your best to cope with each situation. There are things that you can do to help yourself. So instead of focusing on the negatives, focus on missing, whatever, I want you to focus more on gratitude. When we focus on what is going well in our lives instead of what isn't, we can learn to be grateful for events and the people we surround ourselves with, and we're more likely to notice more good things happening. Try and be more mindful, because when we focus on the present moment instead of the future or the past, we can find joy in the simple tasks that we're doing right here, right now. Create some healthy habits such as exercising, good nutrition, healthy sleep habits and routines, because all of this helps us to take back control of our lives, and it helps us feel more energized. And connect with others, because when we connect with others, then we have a sense of purpose and a support network that we can call on when we need to. So it is important to be patient with yourself and explore different strategies to find what helps you best. Now, please do have a look at the description for all the free resources in there. While these workbooks won't eliminate your anxiety completely, because it won't get to the root cause, they can go a long way to aiding you on your journey to be able to control and manage your anxiety. So if you do need to speak to someone, then there'll be a link in the description and a link below where you can get in touch with us, and we'll arrange a call and see how we can best help you. Please do like and comment, as I said, and if you can share any of your top tips in the comments, then I'd be really grateful, and I'm sure others would love to hear from you. So that's it for me right now. So until next time, thank you and goodbye.